either now or next year or 5 years from now, you're gonna have some doors open because of this experience. And ask the dean with Dr. Scott Wright. Hello, Dr. Scott Wright. How are you?
Dr. Gray, I'm doing well. I had a little cough there.
Nice little cough talk.
You're right. Sorry.
That is okay. That's the down and dirty rawness of doing Facebook Live, which is fun.
Right.
I forget what episode we're on. This is episode 7, I think. 7 or 8.
I think you're right.
Yeah, 7.
Yeah,
I'm excited. We are working on our podcast artwork. I have a team member working on the podcast artwork so that we can turn these into podcasts and get them out to the world.
Nice.
And we'll get them all up on YouTube.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We do these live for our special mapped pre-order people, which over 700 people now. Scott, it's crazy.
Right, it is crazy.
It's like they've wanted this and
crazy
we're just waiting for us to create
it. Absolutely. Which
So
is nice. And it hasn't even launched yet.
It hasn't launched yet, no. So I'm going to ask the first question. The first question. First question.
Well, I'll give you the first squancer.
AAMC VITA. 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 How much have you looked into it at this point?
Well, it's been sort of predicted coming or whatever for a long time.
I'm glad you gave me a little backstory there because that was my assumption.
Yeah,
this was not a COVID thing.
No. So I think it's been sort of in the thought, I think, for quite a while, and now I think they have reasons to sort of make it happen in a quicker, perhaps, way. So yeah.
So I have a new name for what AAMC stands for.
I know your name, and I would love to hear you share it with our friends.
Always asking for more money, more cash. Oh man, I screwed it up. Always asking, right? AA, the 4 is kind of just a lowercase f, so that doesn't count. More cash. Always asking for more cash.
Yes. No, you're right.
In my mind, this seems like it's something that wasn't asked for, isn't needed, but the AAMC was like, hey, what can we create that we can charge more money for?
Yeah.
Now I put an asterisk next to that because there is at least one medical school that uses something similar to this already. And that's Utah. University of Utah uses a similar one-way video screening process as part of their secondary essay process. So it's not out of the blue kind of that this was created, but it seems like it's more work for the medical schools. The medical schools have to figure out how they want to incorporate this. They have to figure out their rubrics. They can't control what questions are asked. So it's just kind of force fed down their throat. Be like, hey, we have this new tool for you.
That is the AAMC way. Force feed it down your throat.
Yeah.
Oh, they always get input from the medical schools.
In one ear, out the other.
And then they do whatever they want to do. So
I have a couple issues. Number one, this is just more burden on the student, right?
Yes.
From the student perspective.
And more anxiety.
More anxiety, more burden, specifically this year, right? This is not the year to release this. No. And I know the excuse of, it's to help with social distancing. I'm like, no, it's not replacing the interview. Most medical schools are going to do a virtual interview through Zoom or Skype or whatever platform they're going to use. So it's not replacing that. So don't say it's helping because of social distancing. So it's adding this extra step that's already during a stressful time, number one. Number two, you're so nice that it's going to be free this year. Okay, great. You're going to charge for it next year. And it's more work for the schools this year when their whole process and timeline is all screwed up already. So number one, it seems like the exact wrong time to do it. But then really at the end of the day, it just seems like it's just more hoops to jump through for students, period.
Yep.
It's gonna be more money. It's gonna add more bias to the process, right?
Right.
I would be perfectly okay with this. Number one, if it was free, and number two, if it and free would be, they would just increase the AMCAS cost, so they're going to get their money either way. But anyway,
either way, right?
I would be okay with this if the video wasn't available to the schools, but it was some sort of Z-score similar to CASPer, right? How CASPer has independent raters that are reviewing everything and giving a standardized score to the schools.
Right.
The way that it is now, the schools are going to look at you. They're going to see you. They're going to hear your as I stutter, they're going to hear your stutter. They're going to see the color of your skin. They're going to see the your hair. They're going to see everything about you, and they're going to go, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to move on. When before they would offer you an interview and then have that bias, obviously, because we're humans and we have bias, but have that bias one-on-one in person, and let my personality, let my answers, let my individuality in person with you potentially overcome any bias. But I don't know.
I'll be interested to see how many schools actually use it. But I think regardless of how many schools actually use it, the downside is that it's still going to be added cost for the student, and it's going to be added anxiety for the student.
Yep.
I just don't like it at all.
I don't like it either. And they've already proven, at least through one, this was similar to the standard video interview or whatever it was called, that the AAMC used, because the AAMC, a lot of students don't know, the AAMC also runs the electronic residency application service, ERIS, for medical students applying to residency. The AAMC piloted a project, basically the same exact thing for emergency medicine residency, and that failed. And the emergency medicine people were like, stop doing it. We're not using it. It's not useful. Students were like, this is terrible. And so the AAMC is like, well, we have this project already, right? Well, let's figure out how to make money from it. So anyway.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. My pre-mid years episode next week, as we're recording this, probably on the, I don't know what next week is, 15th, 22nd, will probably be about the AAMC VITA. So
good.
I'm glad you confirmed my, in an unofficial or official way, you confirmed my speculation that this was not a COVID thing. This was something that was planned, and they're like, oh, perfect timing, right? Oh, here's the other thing that I was going to mention earlier was they can't get MCAT registration right. They can't get AMCAS right. No. They
how are they going to get this right?
They can't get anything right, and now they're adding more.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
You're right.
Anyway, all right. Enough AAMC bashing. What's our first question today?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So our first question here: do you believe the U.S. healthcare system will reform for the better after this pandemic exposed its longstanding disparities for disadvantaged communities and its mental/physical burden on healthcare workers? So I'm going to give you the jaded response first. The U.S. healthcare system will not reform because of disparities.
Right.
Period. That's not what drives our country, unfortunately. Right. The question is, will companies be hurt enough by people being out of work? Will employees be out of work, affecting production, aka money making, enough that it hurts the bottom line of companies, and companies start fighting back based on this our employee-based healthcare system that we have in this country, which is one of the only countries that has this stupid system.
Yeah.
That is the only way that this is going to change. Unfortunately, it has nothing to do with the disparities for African Americans, which is showing disparities for those who don't have a good access to preventive medicine, preventive health care. Those with chronic conditions, which are more exposed to COVID or more make COVID more deadly for them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Completely agree with you on that. It's the question said, do you believe the U.S. healthcare? And no, I do not believe that the U.S. healthcare system will get better after this. No.
Yeah. I hope. And
sure.
I've talked about it a bunch with my family and with other people that this is the time, right? This is the moment. And I've joked. I said, if Bernie were our candidate, our primary candidate in the Democratic Party, we would have a universal healthcare system as soon as he came in, because we're in a spot where a lot of, right? And it sounds counterintuitive that our healthcare system is hurting a ton because of a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
We have all these sick people. The healthcare systems are going bankrupt, but that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's because they make most of their money from elective procedures and other stuff that have been shut down or were shut down near the beginning of this. And hospitals lost a ton of money. And so hospitals are really struggling. Luckily, the administration paid a lot of money to bail out, really, if you want to call it that, to give to healthcare systems to keep them open. But they're going to be hurting. A lot of doctors' offices won't survive this or haven't survived this. This hopefully will change, but I don't think it will.
I'm not optimistic.
Here's my hope, Scott, is that I think everything that's going on in this world, both from a pandemic standpoint and from a social justice standpoint, I think those who have empathy are starting to see the light. I think Gen Zers have a ton of empathy, and they're seeing everything unfolding in front of them. And they are voting age, a lot of them. And so I think the only way to really make change is to vote the people who you want in office and vote them into office, both from a local standpoint and from a federal standpoint. So
Agreed.
Get out there and vote.
Go vote. Yep.
All right. That's a deep one. That's a deep first one. All right. I know CASPer is something certain schools require. How do deans utilize this information when looking at applications? Ooh, I like this question.
Well, this is a good question. And I know my experience here in Texas has been that a small number of the schools are requiring, I guess about a third of the schools at this point are requiring CASPer. But none of them, and have required it for several years now, none of them are actually using it yet. They're still studying how it can be used in their process. And so I think the medical schools are doing a great job of really being very careful with how CASPer might be used, how it correlates with a variety of different things that they're interested in, that they want to know about, et cetera. So I think that it's yet to be seen how many schools are actually going to use it. Now, so keep in mind, there's two points to the question. That is requiring it and using it.
Yep.
A lot of schools are going to require it initially, but are going to wait to use it until they really understand what it means and the impact of having that as a part of their process.
Yeah.
So.
Which is the most frustrating part of this process, as with every school, every answer is it depends. It depends on the school. It depends on what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And really that is with every part of the process.
Absolutely.
How do the AdComs use a personal statement? How do the AdComs use the activity list? How do the AdComs use secondary essays? How do AdComs use interviews? How do AdComs use the AAMC VITA? How do it just goes on and on and on and on. every school uses things differently, and
Yep.
that is both good and bad. It's bad because you don't know what to expect, but it's good because how one school uses things may be a complete disadvantage to you, and how another school uses it may help you get in there. So
yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
oh, yeah. How diverse should my experience list be? I've been volunteering as a medical assistant in a private practice since February, and my pre-med advisor told me to stop that and find other experiences. But I love volunteering as an MA, and I want to continue my clinical experience. How diverse should my experiences be? Scott, I'll let you take this one.
Oh, Lord. So, I don't think you should stop being a medical assistant. If you're really enjoying it and you're really having a good experience with it, et cetera. Now you're volunteering. I think the question said you're volunteering as a medical assistant. So what you may want to do is, if you're volunteering as a medical assistant at a pediatrician's office, you may want to seek out volunteering as a medical assistant in a different type of setting to see what that would be like. The differences between a pediatric clinic and a urology clinic, or the difference between a pediatric clinic and a whatever other type of clinic. So, but again, I don't think that's a major deal. I disagree completely with the pre-med advisor's stance on that. And I just think if you're getting great experiences and you're enjoying it, then go for it. Keep doing it.
Yep.
That's my advice.
Yep. I concur. I think it's crazy. I mean, and again, these are people, and they have their jobs, and they think what they know, and they talk about what they think they know. And maybe they talked to one AdCom member at one school who one time said, we want diversity of experiences, and we want students to shadow primary care and shadow surgery and shadow psychiatry. And so that pre-health advisor then turns around and tells every student that that's what they need to do.
That's what all of them want.
That's what all of them want. When it was just one AdCom member from one school, and maybe that's not the vision of the whole admissions committee. It was just that one person thinking that's the best way to become a well-rounded student, and it's just not right. Number one, from you can't extrapolate that to every school with anything, and number two, I think we have a situation, right, again, from a social justice perspective, with everything going on in this world. It's just highlighting the disparities more and more and more and more. And there are students out there who don't have access to this kind of stuff. And they found one, stay in that one, and don't worry about not going to that one and quitting that one and then spending 6 months to try to find another position. And like, do what you can do, make it work, and we'll be good.
Yeah,
we'll celebrate you for that.
Yes.
Oh man, this is a heavy episode today. I'm feeling tense today. All right, I've shadowed a family friend in Argentina for about 80 hours in the last dos años. Is a letter of rec from a physician outside of the U.S. acceptable? So working on a little Spanish there, because earlier today I recorded 4 episodes of the Spanish for Premeds podcast. So that's a fun little project we're working on.
Nice.
What are your thoughts on this?
So I think that, the first thing that I think is that, yes, it would be acceptable. However, I think that I usually talk about things in terms of something being good, better, or best. Or there's a difference between something being acceptable and something being optimal. So the physician you shadowed or whatever in Argentina would be great. What you might guide him or her to talk about are things that are relevant in the American healthcare system. In other words, contact with patients, Your particularly depending on the area of the country you're in, especially, but your fluency in Spanish and how meaningful that was for you to be able to communicate with the patients, and your that you were always on time, and that you were always enthusiastic and stuff like that. No, so if you have a good relationship with this physician, and he or she really wants to write you this letter and is very enthusiastic about it, I would say go for it. It sounds like a great letter to me. You've done a lot of work, obviously, there, and it shows diversity of knowledge of healthcare systems around the world. It shows that you, like I said, particularly if the Argentinian physician really emphasizes the things that cross over well within the context of the American medical healthcare system, then I would say go for it. What do you think about that, Ryan?
So I'll give a couple asterisks. This student specifically said family friend, right? And so I wouldn't extrapolate, and that's good. In my mind, that's good, right? It adds a little bit of, is there a conflict and is this a biased letter? I'll leave that to the side. If this student said, I shadowed a physician in Argentina through a shadowing program that I paid for, I wouldn't get that letter. Right. You're paying for letter, really, in that respect. So that one I would throw out. And then the only one that I like to throw out there is University of Utah, is the only one that I know of specifically where they, at least historically, and obviously it could have changed yesterday, but historically they have had a clause on their shadowing saying they do not accept international shadowing. So, so just those two notes. The family friend is one that comes up a lot with, is this an okay letter to get? So if it's a family friend, right, and if the physician doesn't say, I've known little Johnny since he was a boy because I'm friends with his dad. Right. Exactly. If the physician doesn't say that, then there's probably no way for the admissions committee to know that it's a family friend, and the letter's probably going to be fine. Obviously, there's bias in everyone and blah, blah, blah. But
and I think that is where the student has to guide the letter writer to say, don't mention this or that, do mention this or that. And, so that would be beneficial.
Do you think it adds, right? If you think of what is the goal of a letter of recommendation, is to show who you are and your qualities and traits, and not necessarily, he has the best hands to be a surgeon, right? Right. Wouldn't a family friend be a great person for that?
Well, so to extend that logic, then your family would be great. The problem is bias, like we were talking about earlier. And so I think that you may be right. This physician may have known this student since he or she was born, and so they're unable to be objective about the student, and that's a problem for me.
Objectivity, it's good.
Yep.
Okay,
absolutely.
What do you think of virtual shadowing during the pandemic?
I think it's a hell of a lot better than real shadowing during the pandemic.
Two options: nothing or something. Take something, right? And that's really that's the rationale, right? It's funny. But I got into this argument on Reddit with students saying, go for some virtual shadowing, and they're like, "What are you, crazy? Schools don't want virtual shadowing." I'm like, well, no crap, like. But it's better than nothing.
Right. That's right. And you may get some interesting experiences out of it. And it's not optimal, but nothing these days is optimal because of Miss Rona. So
damn you, Rona. And I'm a huge fan of saying yes as much as possible because you don't know what doors are going to open because of that. Right. So if you have this virtual shadowing position, you may be exposed to a physician, to an administrator, someone who's going to open some doors for you as soon as this COVID is over. Or either now or next year or 5 years from now, you're gonna have some doors open because of this experience, and it may not help you in your medical school application. But you just never know. That's the kind of stuff I like to think.
Agreed. Totally agree with that.
Ooh, bring it. Ooh, big one.
Oh my.
More shadowing. Stupid Rona. All right, I'm worried about my amount of shadowing my pre-med advisor.
Oh, here we go again.
This is funny because most pre-med advisors like when a student says I read on Student Doctor Network and we're here going, my pre-med advisor. Anyway, sorry. Is highly concerned about my number of hours of shadowing, 30 to 40 hours in one specialty, but I work full-time in a nursing home where I actually work with the physicians daily as a medication technician and have great relationships with them. And prior to that, I worked in a hospital and was interacting with physicians frequently as well. I thought I had quality shadowing experience, but she is concerned that it is not enough. And then the rest of the thing gets cut off. So here's the ultimate question. And again, it depends. For the school that you were at, and from your experience as the former executive director of TMDSAS, how common do you know it to be, or have you seen it to be, where schools have minimum cutoffs for shadowing?
That would be 0 in my experience. What they're looking for is, and I agree completely with this students' thoughts about their experiences. In my view, there's, what you get out of shadowing is you get contact in the environment. You get to see what's happening with the physician, with the nursing staff, with the other healthcare team members, et cetera, over a period of time. And the same thing you're getting to view in your work experience at the nursing home, in your work experience at the hospital. You're seeing the environment. You're seeing what's going on. In fact, I think what this student lined out is a great sort of grouping of things. You're getting a clinic environment with the shadowing the physician. You're getting a hospital environment. You're getting a nursing home environment. You're getting a lot of different pictures of what healthcare is all about, that you have a richness of all that to be able to talk about in your application. So I don't have any concerns with that. I mean, I think, shadowing, okay, maybe you're limited on the actual shadowing sort of hours, but that's not what medical schools are looking for. They're looking for this richness of experience, and that, in my view, that's what you're lined out in your question, that you got that.
Yeah, I think it's funny, right? It would be very hypocritical, I think, to on one hand for medical schools to say, don't treat this like a checklist, and then medical schools on the other end are treating it all like a checklist. Like, do they have enough shadowing? Do they have enough this? Right? And stats aside, right? Stats are very different, and we need to meet a threshold if you want to call that a checklist to meet that threshold.
Right.
I like how you framed it from an experience perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have enough experience to know that this is what you want to do? And that's how I like to frame it when I used to go to conferences and give talks. Was
back in the day.
Back in the day, this is not a checklist for the medical schools. This is experiences for you to prove that this is what you want.
Correct.
So that you're not one of the 60% of physicians who are burnt out of your career because you went into it thinking it was something that it's not.
Different. Yeah.
So my only kind of asterisk that I like to add on to this is the consistency side of it. So 30 to 40 hours, I think, is probably plenty. But if it was 3 years ago, then the question is,
good point.
Did you just do it to check off a box and now you're on to something else?
Right.
And so I always like to preface it with, like, if you can get 5 hours a month, right? Maybe it's one day a month or one weekend morning a month where you can go shadow for a little bit. And over time that adds up to a lot, but it's really not the total hours I care about. It's the consistency showing that you're interested. And again, I'll caveat that with, if you're in a situation where you have to work and you don't have time and you have kids and all of that stuff gets taken into account through these reviews and stuff. So
I agree with that. I do agree with that. The timing is, which was not covered in the in the question, the timing would be sort of an important thing.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring it. Hey guys, I'm an incoming junior, and my classes, including Physics 1 and Lab, Microbiolab, Lab, and Biochem, just went online for the fall. It's also looking like my clinical experiences will be canceled or at least altered. Thanks, Rona. It's like that. Thanks, Obama. Thanks, Rona. I felt like I was on a really good track to apply next cycle, but now I'm second guessing myself. I'll still have meaningful clinical experience, but it'll be cut off by a semester or maybe more. Is less clinical experience and online labs and prereqs enough of a reason to take a gap year? Yeah.
Well, wow. That's, the first thing I would say is something, Ryan, that we have talked about a lot and we repeat over and over again is you're not any different than anybody else in the cycle right now anyway. Everybody's classes are online, labs, and, everything is in such a chaotic state right now, including clinical experiences, including volunteering being cut off and shadowing being cut off and everything else. You're not going to be the only person out there who this is affecting in that way. So number one, I would say know that in my view, you have to feel right about it though. If you want to take a gap year because you're concerned about that, but my worry is, Lord forbid that we're still in the same situation this time next year.
Please no.
I know, right? Exactly. But who knows? And so, I would recommend that the student really push forward. If they're incoming junior, they've got a whole year to make this decision. You don't have to make this decision right now in terms of whether or not you're going to take a gap year. You can, still prepare. You can still go ahead and prepare for the MCAT. You can still take the MCAT if you haven't already. So I would just go forward and still try to be on the right path, because I think everybody's in this situation, and I just don't see it that it should really force you necessarily into a gap year.
Yeah. Yeah, I can start to see questions because I know premeds and premeds. Yeah. I can start to see the questions of, right, if you're in Southern California, Dr. Wright, UCLA is online, but Loma Linda is in person. Should I transfer schools and go to Loma Linda to take in? Like, no. I can see those kind of questions starting to pop up because we're gonna have schools doing their own thing.
Yeah, and I don't fault premeds for thinking that way. I think it's a reasonable and very normal way to think, particularly when you have a variety of different schools in your area which are offering things in a hybrid way maybe or whatever. But ultimately I think it's about learning. It's about whether you're doing it online or whether you're doing it in class or a hybrid method or whatever. It's all about learning. And if you learn the material and you do well in the class and you prepare well, in those classes that are relevant to the MCAT, and you are able to do well in the MCAT, then that's the key. It's about learning. It's not about where you took them or whatever. Medical schools are going to be very forgiving for the next couple of years on this issue of online education. And I think you just got to focus in on not what do they want, what are they going to do, what is this going to mean? Focus in on your learning the material.
Yep. Or as I like to say, you do you, boo.
Yeah, there you go.
When would be an appropriate time to ask physicians about shadowing again? And how would you recommend we even go about it considering the current situation? So I'll give
please do.
The kind of feedback just from a physician standpoint is you're going to find physicians just like the general public who think everything that's going on with COVID is completely blown out of proportion. Unfortunately, this pandemic, at least in this country, has been politicized, and so those on the right and those who are more conservative think that this is being blown out of proportion. And so those physicians may be more likely to say, "Hey, yeah, come and shadow because this is no worse than the flu."
Right.
And you may have to wear a mask and you may need to take some extra precautions, but they may be completely fine with you shadowing. And if you're okay with those risks, then go for it. Yeah. So in my mind, right, and this is just kind of general life advice from Dr. Gray, is when you say something like, I'm not going to ask because of XYZ, that's your own thinking. Those are your considerations. Let the physician tell you no, right? Go and ask and say, hey, Dr. Smith, I know, right, it's a crazy time. I hope you're okay. I hope the clinic's doing great. I'm a pre-med student. I'm looking for shadowing. Here's why I want to shadow you. When are you taking shadows again, or students that can shadow again? I would love to be considered once you open up, and they may write back and go, hey, we're taking shadows now. We never stop shadowing because this is blown out of proportion. And so don't let your own considerations prevent you from getting some great experiences that are out there, right? They're shadowing experiences out there. They're few and far between, thankfully. So ask now.
Yeah. I agree with that statement completely. Don't tell yourself no. Don't tell yourself no.
Yep.
Ask and let them tell you yes or no. Yep. Perfect. Absolutely.
It's very common feedback that I give, kind of this similar advice for schools. Let the med schools tell you no.
Absolutely.
Oh, my grades aren't good enough. Oh, my MCAT's not good enough. Oh, I don't have enough of this. Oh, I don't have enough of that. I'm like, unless you're like a 2.0, 490 MCAT, right? Obviously, those are super exaggerated, but there's a huge gray area for students where I'm like, you should apply. You should apply. There are going to be some schools based on your experiences, based on who you are, that are going to want to take a look at you. Let them tell you no, and then you'll have your answer if you need to take some more classes or if you need a better MCAT score or whatever that may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Is it worth it to retake classes you got a C+ in if you are already past it in your series? I got a C+ in Gen Chem series, but A's in Orgo 1 and 2 in Biochem. They just really hurt my GPA. I have an answer for that.
Yeah, go for it.
So the math is all the same, right? It's at the end of the day, extra classes is just math, and it's you're adding credit hours and you're adding GPA. So you've already proven, speaking to this student, you've already proven that your foundational knowledge is fine. You got A's in Orgo 1 and 2 in Biochem. And for some reason, your brain just didn't work with Gen Chem, which is very common, strangely. And so in my mind, there's no reason, again, getting back into micro versus macro, right? Students like to think micro of the med school's not going to accept me because I got a C+ in my Gen Chem 1 and 2 versus the medical school is looking at me holistically, looking at my GPA holistically, looking at my trends going from a C plus to A's, which is awesome. And I'm going to take some more upper division classes that I'm interested in because
absolutely
they're gonna really interest me, and I'm gonna get some more A's in them versus man, I gotta go take Gen Chem 1 and 2 again.
Yeah, agreed.
And then you walk out with C's again and you're like, oh crap. And that stinks.
Yeah, agree. I completely agree with that. It would be much better to take, upper level science classes that you're interested in that are really going to be much more relevant to preparing you for what you're going to face, and particularly in that first 6 to 8 weeks of med school, maybe that first year, than Gen Chem would be.
Yeah. Now it's a completely different question and potential answer. If the student said, I just took Gen Chem 1 and I got a C plus, should I retake it? Right? They're just hot off the press, right? They just got their grade. I got a C plus. Well, crap. Right. And that's where going back into what does your foundation look like?
Right.
Did you just bomb the last test because you pulled an all-nighter and you went to a keg party or whatever and you just you were dumb and it reflects in your grade, but you know the material and you're going to do just fine in Gen Chem 2? Or did you really, really struggle with the material and a C plus was amazing because you were really struggling? And well, maybe you should retake it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It depends a little bit on why and when. I agree. Yeah.
And just to throw out there, again, for MAPT, right? MAPT will be able to say, oh, you got a C minus. For most schools, that's not passing, right? We'll be able to put that in there. So C plus is usually passing for medical schools.
Yeah, but C minus is bad.
Yes.
Okay.
Bring it. Is that it? Is that all we got?
Oh, God. Oh, here's one.
Oh, Enrique. On a recent interview, Enrique Hasso mentioned that TMD-SAS data indicates that the rate of acceptance of seasoned non-trads. What's a seasoned non-trad? Just enough salt and pepper. By Texas schools is somewhat low. That being said, what can seasoned career-changing non-trad do to be considered a desired applicant? Interesting. Mr. TMD-SAS?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that comes to my mind is the last sentence of this question. What can seasoned career-changing non-trads do to be considered a desired applicant? Is the exact same question, even if you took out the word seasoned career-changing non-trad. If the question was, what do I do to be a great candidate? Then it'd be the same answer, in my view, as if it was a seasoned whatever a seasoned non-trad is.
Yep.
He or she further clarified it's older. So I don't know what older means. Are you talking about 31 or are you talking about 51? What does that mean? But,
seasoned, properly seasoned, properly aged wine.
There you go. So what I would say is, it's the same for everybody. You want to have a good, you want to have good experiences. You want to have a good track record in terms of your academic track record. Now, because you're an older applicant, that you are, and your past experiences in school were poor, then you're obviously building a new framework for a medical school to look at you academically speaking. So you want a good number of hours of coursework to say, this is who I am as a student now, as opposed back when I was 22 or whatever. And so you want to be able to show that you can do school and they can do it well. You want to show that you have the cognitive ability through, doing well on the MCAT, and you want to get a lot of good experience in medicine through shadowing and or clinical experiences, et cetera. So I don't necessarily think that the question is about your age as much as it is about the very things that we talk about with traditional applicants. In terms of what they want to see is the same thing. Now, having said that, the key for a career changer especially is why. Why do you want to do this now? Why do you want to make this change? What led that decision-making process to sort of unfold? And the story has to make sense to an admissions committee. In other words, you have to be able to say, you can't say, well, I was sitting around the living room and I was watching Grey's Anatomy one night, and all of a sudden, boom.
I remembered when I played with my doctor's set when I was a kid. I don't know why I went all Southern with my accent, but that's usually the thing. And it's interesting, right? I think first off, I want to address the question and really hammer home to everyone how we need to use critical thinking. We have failed as a society to use critical thinking.
Yep.
The same thinking that goes into, wow, lots of students are taking gap years, therefore I should take a gap year to get into medical school, is flawed thinking, because we don't know why those people were taking gap years. We don't know why the students got into medical school. The correlation doesn't equal causation.
The herd mentality.
When the question is only 23%, whatever that question was, right, of seasoned non-traditional students are getting in, well, how do I stand out? The question implies that medical schools are only accepting a quarter of non-traditional applicants. How do I become the best non-traditional applicant? Whereas we don't know why the 75% of non-traditional applicants didn't get in.
Right. Exactly.
Do those students have 490 MCAT scores? Do those students have zero clinical experience, zero shadowing, 2.0 GPAs? We don't know why those students didn't get in, so we can't make those sorts of leaps in our assessment and judgments and reasoning. And so the biggest mistake that I see, going back to your last point, was why, right? Mm-hmm. Why is this? The biggest mistake that I see non-trads make is not understanding, and probably the biggest mistake that I see all students make, is not understanding the whole point of this application process. It's not to be the best GPA student. It's not to be the student with the best MCAT score. It's not to be the student with the most hours. It's to be the student who can explain why the heck they want to go through this process. Absolutely. Come out on the other end with hundreds of $1,000s worth of debt, with bags under their eyes, aged 10 years, right? If you look at Obama pre-office and Obama post-presidency, right? That's your life coming out of residency. Why would you want to put yourself through that when there are other careers out there where you can be happier and make more money and do all this other stuff? Why? And so I see a lot of non-traditional students who their reason why is, well, 15 years ago I wanted to be a doctor and now it's just the best time, right? I'm like, what have you done since then? Oh, nothing. I'm ready.
Right. No, you're right. I agree completely.
I'm anxious today. I don't know why. I'm just like, I'm wound up. Oh, man. Any more, Rachel? Yes, no? Oh, yeah, here we go. I don't know if I've heard this addressed yet or not, but since the dean has experience specific to Texas schools.
The dean.
The dean. That's you, the dean, the Mr. Former Director of Admissions at UT Southwestern. Can he, Scott... This is Dr. Wright. Can Dr. Wright provide some insight into how receptive Texas schools are to out-of-state applicants? Oh, I love this one. Particularly from Tennessee, if it makes a difference, being that we helped them become a state now. Reparations, you owe it to me.
Oh, that's too funny. So 175 years ago, when Tennessee helped us in 1836 to 1845,
yeah, but see that's counterproductive because Texas wants to secede. So it's like,
I mean, exactly.
Why did you do this to me?
Yeah, right. No, I no. So number one, no, it doesn't matter what state you're coming from. It doesn't matter. You know, very few admissions committee members are going to even know that Tennessee had a connection with Texas. I happen to know that. I happen to know that because I'm a big history buff. So, but you know, the average medical school admissions officer or admissions committee member would not even know that.
Explain state law for out-of-state applicants.
Basically, the state law is attached to the every 2 years when the legislature meets is attached to the appropriations bill, and essentially it says,
and appropriations is funding, right?
Yes,
Just
funding.
Big word for everyone.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it basically says that you risk losing your state funding if you have more than 10% out of state students in your class.
Yep.
So the medical schools are going to be very, 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 very cautious about that. And so what that basically means is that if you look at the stats about out-of-state students versus in-state students, the GPAs are not a whole lot different in terms of the average GPA score. If you looked at in-state residents getting into medical schools versus out-of-state residents getting into medical schools, very similar average GPAs. The big difference is in the MCAT score. Yeah. Most Texas medical schools have. You can guarantee that the average for non-Texas residents in the class for MCAT scores is going to be considerably higher, and that's the differentiator. So what they're looking for are, now, having said that, there are students there are medical schools in Texas who do try to figure out if you have some connection to Texas. It's not going to make you a Texas resident, but it may mean that they feel better about having you in the class as a non-resident because your grandparents live here, or you lived here when you were 5 and 6 years old and still have a lot of friends and family here, but you moved away with your parents to wherever. Yeah. And so I think that it depends a little bit on the story, because everybody's going to say, oh, I love Texas. I love hot weather. I want to be, whatever. I want to stay in Texas forever. I never want to leave.
I like big trucks.
Yeah. Or big, cows and horses.
Yes. I love the feral hog problem, and I want to come solve it.
Exactly.
If you don't know the feral hog problem, go to YouTube. There's some interesting videos out there. Yeah, it's interesting, right? And Texas is not unique with kind of the mandate for a certain threshold or certain Correct. Maximum for out-of-state students. There are a lot of states that have that for their public schools. Yeah. The thing, and I've talked to Enrique to see if he can pull this data, and he'll work on it when he's not busy doing everything else. Is really trying to get to the data of. Because on TMD-SAS, and correct me if I'm wrong, TMD-SAS does ask your high school, right? Does ask Where you went to high school.
Yes.
So TMD-SAS could look at your application and go, okay, you're not an in-state resident, but you went to high school here in the state. So we can look at these ties and see where all weaves together. Correct. And that's something I'm really interested and excited about with Mapped, to be able to get this kind of data to go, this student isn't a resident of the state, whether it's Texas or another state, but they got into an in-state school. What sort of connections and data can we look at that we can then help other students and go, you know what, this one public school, we'll use University of Colorado as an example, right? Just where I'm at. University of Colorado, and they do get a lot of out-of-state students, but that's okay. Let's just, for exercise purposes, right? University of Colorado, they only accepted 10 students last year from out of state. Well, who's behind that, right? And in Mapped, maybe 5 of them were Mapped users, and we can go, well, those 5 students used to live in Colorado. They just aren't Colorado residents anymore, or right, whatever those potential connections are. Right, we can gather that data and help make students understand that data a little bit more, and maybe not waste some applications, which schools are going to like because they want the secondary money, but. That's the right thing to do.
And I will say, let me just say this, that TMD-SAS does get a lot of non-resident applications. About a quarter of our applicant pool is non-residents.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of them. Because
why is that?
Well, we have a lot of schools in the state. So
there's another reason, Scott. Why do students want to come to Texas?
Because it's awesome.
besides that?
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper. I guarantee you the far majority of students want to apply to Texas schools because tuition is so much cheaper.
Yeah.
Which is the wrong reason to apply to schools.
No, absolutely. But it happens. And so,
Yep.
Agreed.
All right. We're at our witching hour. It's been another great episode of Ask the Dean. Thank you, everyone, for coming, hanging out. We got to play with Mapped a little bit more. We're playing with it more and more every day. And we were hoping to open it up for some students this week, but it looks like it'll be next week to do some one-on-one onboarding of some students. It's coming soon.
Yeah, it's coming.
I need to find my I have a project. I need to find my AMCAS application. I have it here somewhere printed out because I want to take everything in my AMCAS application and put it into Mapped just to have a full kind of look in there. But
yeah.
I'm excited.
Well, it's good to talk to everybody.
Yes. Have a great week. We'll see you next time here on Ask the Dean.
Yes.